Okay. So tonight I'm going to talk about the power of a name. It kind of goes along with the covenant stuff, but I'm doing a little bit more than that. So it's the power of a name. Now, some say that the most important word in the world to a person is their very own name. When you're in doing business classes or you're learning about interacting or relationships, the first thing they say is learn a person's name. And, to repeat their name however many times the first time you meet them, that way you can remember their name. And Dale Carnegie says, a person's name is to him or her the sweetest and most important sound in any language. They said, so names are incredibly important to our identity. They carry deep personal, cultural, family, and historical connections. Yeah. So it's all from personal to family to historical. I mean, when you know your name, you know where your history is. You know where you come from, and many times you can trace back what all's gone on in your family just by your last name. But in Genesis 1, we can see the account of God forming creation. And the first 3 days you see this process. That God speaks, let there be light. Something is formed. Light, firmament, the waters. And then it says, and God called it by name. And then he says, it is good. So, let me get back over there. He said, like in Genesis 3, it says, let there be light, and there was light. And then he divided the light from the dark. And then in verse 5, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And he said, it's good. So he speaks, it's formed, he calls it by name, it's good. But then, when he starts creating the plants and the animals and stuff, he doesn't talk about calling them by name. Why? Because he left earth's dominion to man. And it says in Genesis 2, verse 19, out of the ground, the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was his name. So this was when God was trying to find a suitable companion for Adam. So he formed the animals and then he brought them to Adam. And that word call and called, to see what he would call them, and whatever Adam called each living creature, that was his name. So call and call is the same letter, the same Hebrew word, kara, is Q-A-R-A, kara. It means to call out, to address by name. But when it says that was his name, that word is Shem. It's a definite position, a mark of individuality. It's a mark of character, honor, and authority. So when he called them by name, that's what it actually became. That was their position. So when he said giraffe, the giraffe became a giraffe. Okay? And so when someone in authority gives a person a name, that person is now set into position. Okay? That person becomes that. When your parents call you by name, you become their son, their daughter. When a boss says, this is your name, this is you're now a supervisor, that's the position you become. Okay? So that's why it's really important, especially for parents, to really think about what you're going to name their kid. Because that's what that child was going to become. In 1948, 2 Harvard professors published a study on 3,300 men who had recently graduated. I thought this was really interesting because they discovered that men with unusual names were more likely to flunk out or exhibit negative psychological effects than those with common names. So other research say that names can influence the choice of the profession, where we live, who we marry, grades we earn, stocks we invest in, whether we are accepted to a school, whether we are hired to a particular job. It affects our quality of work, whether we give money to disaster victims or not. They said that if you, like when a hurricane comes through, if that hurricane is named your name or even the first letter of your name, you're more likely to give to the disaster victims. So much of this is, it goes back to your own value and identity. But you don't think about all this stuff because you didn't give you your name. Your parents gave you your name. But all this affects your entire life. So look at Abraham. Okay, Genesis 12. God covenants with Abram that if he leaves his father's house, what is that? What's his father's house? It's his identity. It's his history. It's his position. It's who he is. If he leaves that, God would make him a great nation. Okay? Abraham was now 75 years old. Okay, think about it. He was established. He was already deeply imprinted in his identity. But then in Genesis 17, Abram's now 99 years old. So that's 24 years later. Now he's even more established. Now he's already left his house. He's become his own man. He's developed his own wealth. He has his own servants. He is very rich now. He's even had a child named Ishmael. So he's quite established. But at that point, God visits Abram again, and he says in Genesis 17:5, no longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. So God takes that point and he renames Abram. Now, Abram means high father, which you could take it, okay, God said, I'll be a father of many nations. He's a high father. But Abraham means the father of a multitude. Okay? Sarai, he said, was the head person. It means to have dominion. But God said, I'm going to name Sarai Sarah. It's a female noble, a princess, a queen. So in both of those situations, God added the Aleph Bet Hey, which means breath. God breathed into them again. And God said, I'm changing your name. But when Abraham and Sarah accepted their new positions, they accepted their new names, 1 year later, Isaac was born. So even though Abraham had already given up his identity and moving out from his father's house, and even though he had done everything that was covenanted with God, he was still not the father of the multitude that God was looking for until God changed his name and he accepted that position. Okay? Ecclesiastes 6:10 says, whatever one is, he has been named already. For it is known that he is man, and he cannot contend with him who is mightier than he. So when Solomon wrote that verse, whatever one is, he has been named already. He used both of those words together right there. Whatever he has been called, whatever he has been named. It's the Kara and the Shem. He used both of them. So when God, the ultimate authority, calls us and sets us in position, we are that. We become that. Right? We just have to accept it. When God puts us in that position, when we have our name, then that is when we have to accept that. Look at Jacob. His name means supplanter. But when the Lord changed his name to Israel, he will rule as God, or he's the Prince of God. He continued to use the name Jacob. From now through the rest of his life, he would interchange it with Israel periodically, but most of the time he kept his name Jacob. And if you think of the Israelites, they say you're the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not the Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, because Jacob never accepted his position. Now, Joseph ended up giving him a royal funeral at the end, but Jacob you have to accept that name. You have to accept that position. So when you look again at the creation account, God uses the process of naming to bring order to our chaotic, our dynamic world. What was dark, he called light. What was void, he called land. What was the turbulent waters, he called the seas. He brought order from the chaos. All right, the chaos that Abraham caused by having Ishmael was changed back to a blessing by renaming him Abraham and bringing forth Isaac. Right? God was trying to have Jacob coming to the fullness of his destiny by calling him Israel. Jacob didn't receive that, but we now have the nation of Israel. We don't have the nation of Jacob. So even through that, God still brought order to the nation. so that we have the name, the Israel, the princes of God, the children of God. They rule through God. So we see that names are tremendously important. When God breathed into Adam, he called him by name. He set him into position. In Genesis 1:26, he gave him dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the cattle, over all the earth, over everything that creeps on it, right? Psalms 24:1-2 says, "The earth is the Lord's and all of its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters." God made the earth, so it's all his, right? He can do with it what he wants. It's his. But what he did was he made Adam, and then he told Adam, now you do what you just saw me do. You do it. So then God brought all the animals and the birds to Adam. What did Adam do? Adam breathed into them. He called them by name. He set them in position. Just like God had called Adam by name, breathed into him, set him in position. So God gave man the right to name all the animals. God could have named everything. And then he could have said, Adam, you have authority. But Adam would never have the complete authority, a complete dominion, until he named them. So God gave man the right to name all the animals, and at the same time, he gave him the right of dominion over them. Okay? So it's a principle. It's a spiritual law across the globe. And primitive tribes, as well as Islamic, Jewish, Egyptian, Eastern religions, even Christianity, there's a common concept that knowing the name of something or someone gives you power over that thing or person. Naming something or someone gives dominion over that thing or that person. Right? Man, if we think about it, that's what we're taught. Ephesians 1, verses 19-21. And what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us who believe, according to the working of his mighty power, which he worked in Christ, when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all principality and power and might and dominion and every name that is named, not only in this age, but in that which is to come. So we apply this to healing. You know, if a person's having a difficult time being healed of a certain ailment, I'll say, go to the doctor, get the name. Get the name of that ailment that you're dealing with. Most often, they'll receive healing as soon as they begin calling that ailment by name. You know, when I pray over somebody, I want to know what I'm praying for, what the name is, you know, and as I speak into that situation, they're healed. Now, if I just arbitrarily say, be healed, you know, what are they looking for? There's no name. You know, I was battling depression for over 30 years. I became suicidal when I was like in about the 6th grade. I remember the first time I tried to commit suicide. But when the Lord showed me to try to stop battling the depression, but to come against the spirit of death, at that point I was immediately healed. Why? I called it by the correct name. Okay? So I haven't had to deal with suicidal depression in over 15 years. Why? You called it the correct name. But I battled it for 30 years. So when you know the name, then you have that power, that dominion over that. So isn't it interesting that the second commandment is you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain? What's so important about the name of the Lord? Right? Vain, it means evil, ruin, false, uselessness, deceptively, lying, falsehood, emptiness of speech. So when you're just emptily saying the name of the Lord, that is taking his name in vain. Think about it. We know that the Jewish religion prohibits the name of the Lord being spoken out loud because it's so holy. Right? Well, one reason is that in naming God, it might be seen as an attempt to assert dominion over him. Okay? Or it could be to illegitimately duplicate a power that God uniquely possesses. Because when you name him, then you're asserting that. Well, by the same token, we understand that when we call upon our God by his name, whether it is in prayer, whether it is in praise, however we're calling on his name, that's how he manifests. When we call upon him as healer, he manifests as healer, right? When we call upon him as warrior or our Father or the great I am, that's how he manifests. Why? Because we're calling on the name of God. There's a power in a name. Even modern day mathematicians, now they place a heavy emphasis on naming as a way to gain cognitive power over objects even before they have been understood. So mathematicians, I'm talking modern mathematicians, they have observed that on the basis of intuition, they can develop concepts that at first the ideas are just too great. They can't, or they're too extreme to express. They just don't know. Think about quantum physics. We just don't even know what to call this, so we'll call it a quark. We don't know what this is, so it's a string. It's just too, they just can't describe it. Or that concept resists definition. So they know that something's there, but they can't put their finger on it. But when the concepts are named, then they're brought under control. So they say it's to be properly named, that these concepts must be named before they can be brought under control and properly enter the mathematical world. So by naming, mathematicians say this is a path that brings control to these objects. So why all of a sudden is there this massive understanding of quantum? Because all of a sudden, these modern mathematicians understand that if we name something, if we name the way the atom moves, if we name the way the proton moves, if we name this stuff, then all of a sudden it becomes, it's brought into a way that we can understand it. It manifests in a way that they confirm their identity and their purpose. What is that? It's the dominion that God gave us from the beginning. It's because they're a part of the earth realm. But we don't think about that. We just say, this is just some ooey thing. But it's a Christian principle that we've taught for years, but we don't understand it in the manner of the naming. We just, what do they say? Name it and claim it. But it's not so much naming it. It's naming it with a purpose. Okay? Think about it. When you begin to understand that Hebrew alphabet, that it's the building blocks of creation, then you begin to understand the deeper concepts of creation and the power of names. What did God do? He used the alphabet. He brought it together as a building block, and that became that thing. The name became the thing. Or that thing became the name. It got into position. So, out there on the limb, why do magical spells and incantations of the occult often use Hebraic words or Latin words? Because it's the foundation of language. And from those two languages, almost every language has their origin. It's the power of naming. They understand that. So in Romans 4:17, again, it's what we've quoted over and over. It says, God who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did. That Greek word for calls there is kaleo. Okay, it means to call, to give a name to. Okay, so it's more than just calling something forth. It's giving a name to it. It's calling it into its position. So we have power, and we hold that power to create things by naming them. It's the power of naming. Okay? I'll just step out on a limb. I was trying to decide if I'm going to do this or not, but I will anyway. If you think about it, well, a lot of people don't understand this, but this is truth. Okay? In voodoo, in the witchcraft, in the shaman, they understand the power of names. That's how, lots of things, how they receive their power is the power of naming or the power of speaking that thing. So if they find a person who recently died, Sometimes they go dig up the body, whatever. They will take that body, which is empty shell, and they will call for a demon or evil spirit by name, invoking the name of that spirit, and all the other incantations, whatever, and they put that spirit into the body. Okay, that body is then activated. Okay, it walks, it talks like a person. Okay, if you didn't know that person had died, that person can go sign a paper and they wouldn't know that that person's dead. Okay? But the only issue is that that body is still decaying because you're dealing with a non-living spirit. It's not a living spirit. It's a dead spirit. So that body continues to decay. So when you're in the presence of one of these, for better word, zombies, you can smell death because that body is dead. That body is decaying. But it's the power of the name, it's the power of dominion that is allowing the witch doctor to control that entity. Okay? It's the spiritual principle. You know, of course, we as Christians would not want to do that. But you can use, I mean, what I'm saying is that is the power of it. The power of taking a body that can no longer function in the living and cause it to be a puppet, to cause it to activate, cause it to act like a normal individual. Where people, like I said, especially when they first start and the body is still fresh, for a better word. That sounds gross, but anyway. They wouldn't even know. You would not know that that person is not a living person. It's only as they decay. But if they should understand that power, how much more should we as believers understand that power? How much more when we say every day that God has given us power to create through our mouth, that we should not understand the power of naming, that we should not understand the covenant of names. Okay, am I making sense? Okay. So when God created Eve, what did he do? He brought her to Adam. What was the first thing that Adam did? He named her. He said, you'll be my woman. You've taken out of me. So the first thing Adam did was name Eve. Okay, so when a man and a wife are married, what happens? It's customary for the husband to give his wife his name. It's customary, or it was customary, for the wife to take the husband's name. It's a name covenant. What does that mean? It means the two are joined. They're now one family, one entity. You know, they're now that flesh of my flesh. Why? Because of the name covenant. Okay? That's also why there's such a push nowadays for that not to happen. The woman will retain her name or hyphenate the name or whatever. It breaks down the family covenant and also takes the man's place as the head of the house. Because by doing that, she's not giving him dominion over her. So she's taken away the head. If you're not taking your husband's name, don't come and say, well, he's not the priest of my house. Well, you haven't get him in that position. There's a power in the name. You know, so the name covenant is powerful. That's after my first marriage, I worked through forgiving him and all the process, cut off all the communication with him and all that, and eventually I married Steve. But every day, when I would get into the shower, I would hear my first married name repeated over and over and over again. I didn't care. I could be thinking about how blue the sky was, and I would hear this name in my head, in my ear. I would try and turn it off. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what mood I was in. It didn't matter anything. As soon as I had that routine in the morning, that name would go over and over in my head. Well, so I went to a Randy Clark conference, and they were teaching on soul ties. And I'm like, I never heard soul ties. They said, walk through it with somebody. I walked through cutting the soul ties with my ex-husband. From that point on, I have never heard my first married name repeated in my ear again. Why? Because I had completely broken the name covenant off of me. I didn't know I even had it. but there's that power of the name covenant. And so you have to understand how powerful a name is. So think about it. In Revelation 2:17, one of the rewards listed for the overcomer is that an overcomer is going to be given a white stone, and on the stone a new name written, which no one knows except him who receives it. Have you ever wondered why in the world would you get a name that nobody would receive, and it's given to an overcomer? And the overcomers get like the best prizes and the best rewards. And so one of these best prizes is you're going to get a name that no one knows. Wow. Well, what does that mean? That means nobody has power over you. You have a stone, you have a name, and it's your new name. So nobody knows that. Nobody has power over you in any way. Nobody has any kind of dominion because nobody knows that name. Nobody can speak that name. So it's one of the rewards of the overcomer. What's another reward? In Revelation 3:12, Jesus said another reward of the overcomer is that Jesus will write on the overcomer, so write on that person, the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, and I will write on him my new name. So we all know Jesus, the name above every name. Jesus is going to get a new name. And Jesus said, I'm going to write on that person the name of my God, the name of the city of my God, and my new name. What is that? Name covenant. So it means that the two, or an overcomer, is going to be so united with God and Jesus and even New Jerusalem. They're going to have a covenant that's unbreakable. It is a reward. It is a trophy of the overcomer. So it's that I'm trying to say, booty of war. It's that that treasure that is given to you. So it's not just a passing thing. It's not just a fly-by-night thing. It's a major thing for the Lord to give that to him. Philippians 2, verse 9 and 10 says, therefore God also has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of those in heaven and those on earth and those under the earth. So the name of Jesus is higher than any other name. We know that. And God has given us the privilege of invoking the name of Jesus. What do you say in Mark? If you believe in my name. What is that? Believing in my position. If you believe in who I am, then all these signs are going to follow you. Why didn't Jesus say, if you believe in me? I mean, in a lot of places they'll say, if you believe in me, or if you abide in me, my words abide in you. But how many times does he say, if you believe in my name, if you take my name, if you ask in my name, these things will happen. Why is that? It's because the name is the most powerful thing. The name is the whole position. It's who that person is, their identity, their character, their authority, their honor. It's everything encompasses that name. So when I say Vicky, it's everything about Vicky. When I say Connie, it's everything about Connie. It's not taking any one part out. Oh, I like this part. I don't like. No, it's everything about them. It's their name. Their name encompasses everything. So we have to understand, first of all, who we are. Understand our name. Understand even the name that God's given us. We don't always have control over the name that our parents have given us, but God has ordained that for a reason. What is that? What did Japheth? Jabez. That's off the top of my head. So Jabez, he said, she called him Jabez because he was the son of pain. He didn't have any authority over his name, but he prayed. He said, Lord, bless me indeed. that I may not cause pain. That was his prayer. And what did it say? God heard him. And God answered him. So we can, even if it's the name that we don't think means anything or should mean what we want it to mean, God can change that. He can turn it around to mean what he needs it to mean for you to complete your destiny. But you have to, first of all, understand it and take your identity in that. You have to take your position. Okay? We have to understand the power of names. We have to understand that when we're naming something, when we're calling someone by name, when we're, how many times do we jokingly call somebody names? Well, how can that around you, how can your body, how can anything understand if you're joking all the time and calling people all these names, and then one day you say that what you really mean, how does anybody understand the right and wrong? How does your body know when you're telling the truth or when you're joking? What did Paul say to Timothy? Don't even, coarse jesting. Don't even go by fables. Don't even, jest on stuff. So, is joking wrong? No. Is the way we joke, do we need to be careful? Yes. How powerful are our words? Do we really believe our words create something? Do we really believe that God put that power in our mouth to name something? What if Adam had decided he was going to be funny that name when the animals came around and thought, it doesn't really mean anything. Calls a lion a monkey. Calls a zebra a cow. What would our world look like? Excuse me. It wouldn't. We think that that would be funny or it would all work out. No. There's a reason a lion is a lion, and he walks on the ground, and he's a ruler of the earth. And there's a reason a monkey's in a tree, and acts like a monkey. And that's because Adam put them in their position. So if we believe that Adam could do that, are we not supposed to do that? Excuse me a minute, I'm going to start coughing. But we jest, and we think that it's a light thing. It's not a light thing. And we need to understand the power of our words. We need to start naming those things that God has given us, that God has planned for us. There's a lot of times we say, well, this prophecy, or I have this idea, or, I know this is going to happen, but have you named it a certain thing? What does that mean? What is the name of that? Why was it important that Solomon named the pillars in the temple? Why he called them? Why is it important that they named the mountains? Why is it important that they named the memorials? It was because, why was it important that Jacob said this is Bethel, the house of God? When he named it Bethel, the house of God, even to this day, people can go to Bethel and have experiences in the heavenly places. Why? It's the house of God. But if we can say that all the time, we can say, oh yeah, this really has meaning. Yeah, this is really what we believe. Yeah, we just need to name it. We just need to speak it. I mean, we preach all the time. Ron preaches it all the time. That it's with our mouth. We have a voice-activated system. But until we really understand the power of that, and the power of naming that, it's more than just calling. God just didn't call light. He named it day and night. He didn't just call the firmament. He just didn't say, well, let the firmament be separated and just, we'll not call it firmament from now on. No, he said, and let it be called land. And let the seas be called seas. Let the lines be drawn. Let the boundaries be drawn. So he named them. He calls every star by name. Why? He didn't say, well, there's a star over there, somewhere on that galaxy, somewhere over there. No, he calls that by name. It's important. If it's important that he names the billions and trillions of stars, they're important. So, as he is, so are we in this world. We need to start taking our identity, take our position, and then calling those things around us into their names, into their positions. So it's a name covenant. But it's also creating by naming and putting those things in order, bringing from chaos into order. That's what God did. He brought chaos to order. We are to bring chaos to order. We are to bring things into alignment into our environment. It is by naming. And so I would say study it out, because I spoke quick, but study it out, and there's a lot more to it. But I think this is the basic that you can take it and run with it, if you will. Amen?